What's up, everybody? This is your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga, here to bring you another video with no frills, just the analysis. And today I'm going to be bringing you the Season 2, Episode 5 review of The Walking Dead entitled Chupacabra. And all I have to say is, every week I I I think, where is Sophia? This is going to be the week we're going to find Sophia. And every week that passes, no Sophia. And every week I think to myself, this is really going to hurt this TV show if they don't get this off the ground and resolve this subplot so that there can be some narrative progression. And every week I am wowed by the consistently brilliant material that the writers of this show put out. And as you can probably tell, just straight off 10 of 10 on the nerd scale for this episode. Just amazing. I know you've been, paying attention very closely to the arguments that I've been making and all of the analysis that I've been giving in each episode, but this show has twisted me up so bad that now I'm starting to rethink some of the things that I initially thought. I mean, that's how good they're handling the moral and ethical and psychological complexity of the material that they're putting out in this show. I mean, this is really good. So prepare yourself for a long video because I believe this will be a long video looking at my outline. Like always, this is going to be broken down into two parts. First, I'll give a summary of the episode, and then I'll get into more of the analytical stuff. So first of all, the show opens with a flashback, and it's a flashback of Shane and of how Shane and Lori meet Carol and Sophia, and of course Carl is also with Lori, and everybody's trying to get out of the city, and it's a traffic jam for what looks like miles upon miles upon miles, and it's not too clear where they're going. Um, I know they're trying to escape the city, and perhaps they're going to what appears to be a safe zone, but I'm not really sure about that. But anyway, Shane and Lori go to investigate to see what's the holdup or what's happening at the safe zone or presumably the secure location. And they get there and they're looking out at what appears to be a city. I'm not sure what city it is, but they're looking out at what appears to be a city, and they look up and there are helicopters moving towards that city, and the helicopters close in on the city and they start dropping napalm down on the city. And I was like, holy shit. I mean, you know it's bad when they start dropping napalm bombs on a city. And for those of you who don't know what napalm is like a gel that fuels combustible reactions. So it's an incendiary device. It's that gel is generally mixed with some highly flammable agent, and sometimes it can be combined with some other stuff like white phosphorus to make it stick to objects, especially to humans and skin. And napalm is an anti-personnel weapon. And it's designed therefore to destroy organic matter through fire. So human tissue, human bodies, things like that. And of course they're dropping napalm bombs so that they can sort of get rid of all the zombies. Presumably that's what the plan is, so that they can get rid of the zombies that are in the city. And my thoughts were like, holy shit. I mean, you really can see the scope of this catastrophe, and it really sets the mood for the rest of the episode. Because if the United States military has abandoned the city and then returned with napalm bombs, it's really bad, because the United States military is like one of the most highly trained and one of the best militaries that have ever existed in human civilization. And here we are showing here we are have this scene depicting them abandoning the city and then returning with napalm bombs. So I mean that really spooked me on a visceral level. I mean the aesthetics again of this show just continue to be mind blowing, especially in the way that they set the mood and they set the tone. So the episode is basically again the search for Sophia, and there's some and the group is again sort of fragmented. There are, fragmented plot lines and storylines going on. One storyline is about Shane and Rick, and they're in the woods searching for Sophia, and they start to headbutt on some really important philosophical concepts. So that's one storyline. The second storyline is about the tension that's sort of developing between Herschel and the group of survivors. And I know that I said that, Herschel's the doctor, the I called him, that the fake Christian, the hypocrite. But there's a plot twist at the end of the episode which kind of sheds some light on his anxiety about having other people there. That's you know I'm not going to spoil it, but it really shed some new light on that sort of tension between Herschel and our group of survivors. Another storyline is about Daryl, and it's kind of hard to summarize this because it involves him going through this sort of arduous journey in the woods. He gets thrown off the horse, then he sort of, falls down this steep hill, and lands at the bottom of like a valley or riverbank, and he's got the arrow, and he gets stabbed through the side, and there's this scene where Merrill comes back to him as a vision or sort of apparition and says some interesting things to him, that shows that there may be a problem with Daryl in the future. Won't spoil that storyline either. And also something interesting is developing with Glenn and the girl. I forget the girl's name, but that storyline is continues to be developed in terms of that romantic sort of relationship between those two. That also has some implications for the discovery, or the plot twist that happens at the end of the episode. And also, if you haven't seen the last episode, Lori is pregnant, and that's all I have to say about that. I mean, really horrible idea on Lori's part, but whatever. All right, so now to get into the sort of analytical aspects of this episode. Um, this series is very interesting because it takes place within a very confined space, um, between a very confined group of characters, and so there has to be some way to continue to elicit excitement on the part of the viewer. And so what happens is a lot of times there's a repetition of the same motifs, but with different variations. And I'm starting to figure out this pattern of how they have the same motif, but they sort of alter it a little bit with each episode, which sort of adds another layer of complexity to that theme or that motif, and sort of gives the viewer something new to chew on, in terms of that same motif or the same theme. But they've also introduced a new sort of theme or motif in this episode, that I thought was handled very, very well. Again, I just continue to be stunned by the way that they handle this material in such a complex way. It really is mind-boggling. The writers have really sort of made this show their own because, if this show is based on a comic book series, and I haven't read the comic book series, but I can tell you that they have really found a way to make this show their own through the exploration of certain motifs and themes that continue to occur in each episode. So one of the important things, or rather, I think is probably the most important thing that gets explored in this episode, is the theme of personal identity. And this specifically gets explored through human beings and their relationship to time. Like I said before, Shane and Rick are in the woods and they're again searching for Sophia, and they have a very, very interesting conversation. The conversation starts off about, in a very masculine tone, about, reminiscing about their sexual encounters. Rick is sort of questioning Shane about his sexual encounters that they had in the past, typical male bonding stuff. But as the conversation proceeds, Shane tells Rick that it's really not useful or really not worth it to think about those things because that life is gone. And to paraphrase something that he says, all the people in those stories are dead. And so he seems to be implying that there's no reason to think about the past. And so this sort of opens up the question of how Shane has sort of severed his connection to the past and the implications that that has for his personal identity in the present, in the midst of this zombie apocalypse. So, first of all, let me just, sort of ruminate or explore or investigate more fully this notion of human beings and the special relationship that we have to time. Out of all the animals that we know of, human beings are the only ones who are narrative creatures. That is to say, we have the ability to divide time up into a past, a present, and a future, and to sort of narrativize our lives based on that fragmentation or segmentation of time. And this has really important implications for our notions of personal identity, the stories that we're able to tell about ourselves, and therefore the sort of personal identity that we can develop in relation to the stories that we tell about ourselves is very important for how we view ourselves as human beings. And so when Shane tells Rick that the old world is gone, some interesting things happen where you start to realize that Shane, but not just Shane, but every other person in this series is grappling with the fact that they have been alienated from their past. And so what happens is you start to realize that there's a disjuncture or a fragmentation of identity that is a consequence of them being alienated from the past. Because think about how we think about personal identity for a second. Our abilities to tell people, who we are depends on, where we came from, our upbringing, the things that we learned in the past, our socioeconomic status, the place where we lived. And you can imagine how our personal identity would be fragmented or would be broken if we severed our link to those sorts of questions about our past. And so the way that I begin to think about this is, imagine a lobotomy, but instead of, a lobotomy for your brain, it's a lobotomy for your own identity. And as a result, it's like, cutting off a piece of your own humanity. Because part of what it means to be a human is to think about our personal identity in relation to time and in relation to the stories that we can tell about ourselves. But if we are alienated from our past, that sort of has the effect of cutting off a huge chunk of our humanity. And so the past begins to symbolize or to represent, psychological trauma. Imagine if you couldn't think about your past, because it represented or it symbolized trauma. And so it creates this interesting, um, sympathetic depiction of Shane, and it creates a sort of, more human element. It adds a more human element to the story, and it allows us to identify with these characters through this sort of the complex way that the writers are handling the material in this episode. And I just thought that was amazing, the way they made me think about human beings and their relationship to time. And another way to think about this is how this frequently happens with people who have traumatic past. They have a very difficult time developing their personal identity because to them the past doesn't represent the origin of their personal identity. It represents the ways in which they are psychologically traumatized, and therefore represents the ways in which their humanity has been fragmented or broken. So the way that they explored this notion or this theme of human beings and their personal identity and their relationship to time was just extraordinary in this episode. So, huge, 10 out of 10, A plus to the writers on that part. But it also got me to think about some other interesting ethical and moral implications for the show. And it forces you to ask the question, um, what do these survivors have to sacrifice in order to survive? And you quickly recognize that in part they have to sacrifice their past, because the old world is gone. There's basically a new world that is completely enveloped by this zombie, the catastrophe that is a zombie apocalypse. And so you have to realize that a lot of the characters in this series are either grappling with this sacrifice of the past, and therefore this sacrifice of personal identity in order to cope with this situation, or they're like Shane. They're people who have just completely severed their all linkage or relationship to their past. And so you start to realize that Shane and Rick have very different conceptions of the past, and they have very different relationships to the past. Shane says to Rick something that I thought was really interesting. He says the past is like a drug. In other words, you can't allow yourself to be caught up in these fantasies of what happened in the past. The only thing that we have to focus on in order to cope with this situation is our survival. That's the only thing that we should be focused on. And so, one of the things that Shane says as a result of this reasoning, which really has troubling implications for the ethical and moral aspects of this show, is Rick and Shane are arguing about, again, well, I don't know, again, I don't know if they've argued about this before, but they're arguing about how, whether or not they should continue to search for Sophia. And of course, Rick is convinced that Sophia is alive, and throughout the episode, there is some evidence that develops that shows that Sophia is actually alive and that she's still in the woods, or at least that she was alive very recently. And Shane Shane tells Rick that we shouldn't um, go after Sophia. We should stop our search. And he says about Sophia, she only matters to the degree that the rest of the group can continue to survive. And I thought that was, and a lot of people have pointed this out about Shane, that he's a bastard, that he's brutal, that he's cold-hearted. Um, but I think that, I still feel some sympathy for Shane, because he's sort of disconnected himself from the past, and now he's only focused on survival. And he's traumatized himself because, like I said, it looks like he feels a lot of remorse for Otis, and he doesn't like who he's become, and yet he firmly believes that there's nothing worth salvaging in the past. And as a result, the only thing that he thinks is worth focusing on is his own survival and the survival of the group. And so, as a result, he sort of lost this connection between, or severed this connection between one's humanity and, on the other hand, a commitment to ethics. And so as a result, he sort of, says, we should leave off this search and, not worry about Sophia. Rick, on the other hand, has not severed his connection to the past, and as a result, he's still trying to use the past as a connection to his lost humanity and as a connection to his personal identity. And you can clearly see this in the way that he still wears his sheriff's uniform. Like I said before, this is a very important symbol, and it represents a lot for the show, because he's still connected to this past identity of himself as a sheriff, even though for all intents and purposes the law no longer exists. And so he's trying to sort of keep his connection to his lost humanity, and by extinction, and by not extinction, but by extension, his connection to ethics that he believes is integral or important to one's humanity. And so you can also clearly see this in his hero complex, and of course in his obsession with ethics. And you start to realize that, Shane and Rick, they don't just have different relationships or different conceptions of how the past figure into their present situation. But as a result of that, they also have different conceptions of humanity, or what it means to be a human. So Rick is still fighting to stay human through some sense of connecting with ethics, or by keeping a firm commitment to ethics in this very black and white way of seeing the world. This is either all bad or all good. So he's still trying to recover, or to maintain or hold on to his humanity through his connection or through his commitment to ethics. And you can clearly see this play out in his search, his obsession really, with finding Sophia. And again, he says to Shane that I looked into Sophia's eyes and I gave her my word, and I just cannot go back on that word. And he seems to be saying that even if it means that other people's lives have to be put in danger, because Rick is the de facto leader of the group, and as a result, people look to him for guidance, and they're gonna follow what he says is the right thing to do. Shane, on the other hand, for Shane, humanity to him is, bare bones, and it's broken down to basically survival. And anything that is not conducive to the survival of either himself or the rest of the members in the group, then it has no place, it has no consideration in his worldview. And so there is this interesting tension that develops, and this to me is just absolutely brilliant, the way this plays out and the way this is developed. It even has me reconsidering some of the things that I've said in past videos and in past episode reviews. There's this interesting tension that develops between humanity and ethics. And so there's this sort of rift, or this severing, this disconnection that happens between humanity and ethics. I know for myself, and I would assume for a lot of other people, part of what it means to be human is to be ethical. That what it means to be a human, not just a human but a good human, is to be an ethical human, to be an ethical being. And the show is sort of asking us to ruminate about what it means to be human when you sever that connection between humanity and ethics. So from I think that for myself, from an ethical standpoint, um I think, and I'm not 100% sure about this because I haven't thought it through completely yet, but I think from an ethical standpoint, I agree with Shane, simply because I think that the lives of every member of that group, in combination or in general or in whole, outweigh the life of one little girl. I think, the lives of, 10 people or however many people are in that group. If you, put it on sort of a scale, and you sort of try and calculate the value here, I think the value of everyone else's life sort of outweighs the value of, Sophia's life, because, she's only one little girl. But I think from a human standpoint, I think I agree with Rick, because I don't think that our ethics can be completely dictated by survival. And I think that's what Shane is doing, and I think that's the mistake of his worldview. I agree that the lives of all the members of that group outweigh Sophia's life, but I don't believe that simply because I believe that humanity is merely about survival. Because, like I said in a previous video, there has to be more to a human life than just surviving. There has to be more to life, and that if the quality of life that you have um is not more than is not about more than just surviving, then there's no point to being alive anymore. There's just no point. after that. If the only thing you have to think about is, where your next meal is going to come from, if you're going to be able to evade these zombies that are, constantly hunting you. Life is just not worth living under those circumstances. But, so from an ethical standpoint, I agree with Shane that the lives of all the members of that group outweigh Sophia's life, but not because I'm committed to a conception of humanity that's just about survival. So I disagree with Shane on that aspect, and I agree with Rick that, that a human's life, or that a person's life, has to be about more than just survival. And so, and on top of that, just personally, and I haven't, thought through the sort of paradoxes and contradictions of this position yet, but I really, really, really want to find Sophia. Partially because I think that the humanity of every member of that group is at question, or is at least suspect, if they will see a woman who's lost her child, and they just abandon her, and they just abandon the child. Everybody's humanity at that point is somewhat suspect. And I think this was very, very purposeful on the part of the writers, to have a missing person be an innocent child, because that's another aspect to it. I really, really want them to continue to search and to find Sophia, even if that means endangering the lives of other people in that group. And Daryl is a perfect example of this, because he's, almost killed, searching for Sophia in this episode. um, but I really want them to continue to search, even if it means endangering the lives of other people, because Sophia is an innocent child. And when it comes to children, people tend to view the value of a child's life differently than they view the value of an adult's life. And from a very intuitive standpoint, and a very, visceral standpoint, I just I just don't want Sophia to be killed, and I don't want that to happen, because, like I've said in past episodes, that would just be, you know, psychologically traumatizing on just an imaginable scale. And it would just really be a bad thing, and it would really be a tragedy, if this girl either dies, or the group decides that they can no longer afford to search for her, because the danger to the rest of the group is just too great. So yeah. Other thoughts on this episode? Like I said, at the beginning of this video about the doctor being a fake Christian, uh, there's a plot twist at the end of this episode which sort of sheds light on that sort of, aspect of the Doctor Herschel's, that's his name, or on that aspect of his personality, which to me was just very, very unexpected and very, very shocking. My immediate impulse at the end of watching this episode was to, go to the next episode. I don't have a TV, so I download all my stuff, and I generally download, TV series in bulk, so I'm able to watch, one episode after another. And my immediate impulse after watching this episode was just to click on the next episode. But of course, I have to wait another week to get that episode. That's how, exciting that plot twist was at the end of the episode. It was just really, really shocking and really, really crazy. Um, Also, Lori is an idiot. I'll just come out and say this point blank. And I might seem a little cold-hearted by saying this, but here's a list of useless people. Basically, these people are useless to you. If you care about survival, they're practically useless to you in a zombie apocalypse. Old people, very, very old people, or, sort of infirm people, they're useless to you. Sick people are practically useless to you. They create all sorts of complications. Children are, pretty much useless in a zombie apocalypse. And stupid people. Now, that's not in any particular order, but those are the worst kind of people to have in a zombie apocalypse. And I think Lori kind of falls into that sick people category. I mean, being pregnant isn't actually a sickness, but it is sort of something that does disable you and keeps you or prevents you or precludes you from participating in the group and contributing to everyone's survival in a way that you would be able to do had you not been pregnant. So it is a sort of a disability. And I just can't understand what the hell this woman was thinking by having unprotected sex in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. And so it not only is it freaking bad because now she's pregnant, but there's also the question of who's the father. Because you remember that little romp that was going on in the first episode, I believe, with between Shane and Lori. At that time, Lori had thought that um, Rick was dead, and so she was fooling around with Shane, and we see that. But then, as soon as Rick comes back, which to me is a just a little bit unsettling, she immediately begins to engage in sexual relations with Rick. And so now there's a sort of, just imagine how this is going to mess up or what implications this is going to have for the storyline once it's revealed to both Shane and Rick, and they start to butt heads. I think that's a very interesting path of storyline and characterization development that the producers and the writers are going to lead us down. So that's going to be very very interesting in future episodes. And I sort of felt this intuitively, but I hadn't said it in any of my videos. But it looks like that because there's only two more episodes left before The Walking Dead goes on a sort of hiatus until it comes back on, I believe, January 13th. It looks like the whole first part of this whole first arc, this whole first half of the season is going to be about Sophia, and I anticipate that we will find Sophia probably either in episode 6 or in episode 7, right before the show goes on hiatus. Um, but if they continue with this brilliant material, I really don't care when they find Sophia. But like I said, I do want them to find Sophia at some point. So yeah, this is your boy Uber Hikari, aka the Nerd Nigga. Just brought you another video with no frills, just the analysis. Peace and have a blessed day.